Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. Today we have yet another ranking of Warband mods. Assuming you've seen my other Warband mod videos, you know there is a lot of variety for the game. But for all the mods based on history, or that creates a new fantasy setting, Warband would not have a complete modding community without mods that port other works of fiction to the game. And today, those adaptation mods will be the ones that I rank. Any mod based on games, or books, or TV shows. Now, it goes without saying, but of all my rankings, this is likely going to be the most subjective. After all, if a mod is based off something else, whether you appreciate the mod or not can really depend on whether you like the original works, assuming you even know them. If I'm not a fan of the original works, then a lot of its charm will be lost on me, whereas you could still have a blast. With that in mind, let's go. Starting very light at number 11, we have Breaking Bad. I already made a video on this mod just a few weeks ago, and the length itself is pretty telling. So if you're not familiar with Breaking Bad, well, it's just one of the greatest TV shows ever made. Anyway, we have a Warband mod for this show. And really, there's not much to say about it. Imagine native Calradia, but with the addition of a location called the Secret Lab, where you can essentially buy crystal meth and distribute it across Calradia. I had to add it because technically it is an adaptation. It's a pretty funny adaptation, but it's also very experimental. I don't know what the modder is gonna do with it, but who knows? It's mostly funny, but it's still interesting. At number 10, we have Skyrim Civil War. So this mod is pretty self-explanatory. It's a total conversion that takes you to the world of Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls. But really, in terms of features and everything else, that's still pretty much it. Despite the new scenery, a lot of which is very accurate, and some of the items, and even some of the species, there are no new features whatsoever. In a lot of ways, it's like playing native Warband. Hence, it's a pretty good mod, I guess. There's just not that much to it. At number 9, we have Age of Arthur. I'm including this one because technically it's based on the legend of King Arthur, but I don't know that it's based on any specific book. It's just the story of King Arthur. As such, you get to interact with King Arthur, you get to interact with his wife, with Merlin the wizard, and as part of interacting with these characters, there's also a central quest line that you can follow along. What also makes this mod really cool is that it's based off another mod, Brittenwalda, which is one of my favorite mods of all time. Brittenwalda was a mod that took us to the Dark Ages in the UK, and as such, Age of Arthur is pretty similar. The main difference with Age of Arthur is again the story of King Arthur, but it also adds several layers such as religion, with the ability to choose a religion and raid other settlements. There's also more gameplay elements taken from the Viking Conquest DLC, such as the purchasing of ships. So overall, it was already a pretty solid mod before you even brought the Legend of King Arthur into it. The only issues I had when I made my exclusive review on it was that the sieges themselves are kind of broken. A lot of the path just doesn't seem to work properly, and as such, some of the sieges don't really work well, but other than that, it's still a pretty solid mod. If you enjoy this time period and you want to immerse yourself in that specific story, well, Age of Arthur is pretty good. At number 8, we have Struggle for the Illiac Bay. Much like Skyrim Civil War, this mod is based on the Elder Scrolls series. Specifically, the mod takes place shortly before the events of the second game, Daggerfall. The mod, as the title suggests, centers around the Illiac Bay, as the many surrounding factions go to war with each other following the death of a king. As the player, you get to pick from many different races, as well as many different classes, and just explore a surprisingly big world. In terms of features, this goes far beyond Skyrim Civil War though, as the mod was built on top of Hispania 1200. As such, we have a lot of new scenery, we have the fencing animation I like, lots of new items, and then there's the addition of guilds, like mercenaries, mages, and the Imperial Legion, the latter which I joined and got myself a 6 set of armor. After that, you can get lots of unique missions from each guild, and there's also lots of dungeons to explore for loot, which I really like, and there's also some magic elements, though it's mostly basic. All in all, this makes Struggle for the Illiac Bay a pretty solid adaptation overall. That said, I'm not an Elder Scrolls player, so most of the charm is lost on me. Definitely worth a shot though, and much better than Skyrim Civil War. At number 7, we have Chronicles of Might and Magic. This mod is based on the video game series Heroes of Might and Magic, which I also haven't played. That said, as a fantasy mod, it's pretty solid. There's a massive world, lots of new items, and tons of non-human species. The variety is just insane. And there's also magic books with the ability to cast lots of different spells with animations to boot, and there's also again lots of dungeons for unique loot, although in this mod you can also bring your whole warband with you, so it makes for a lot of fun. This makes Chronicles of Might and Magic a really solid fantasy mod before you even get into the world it's based on. However, I do rank it slightly higher than Struggle for the Illiac Bay, if only because I feel it's more ambitious. At number 6, Star Wars Conquest. That world, I do know, but I mean, who doesn't? And while you might think that bringing Star Wars to Warband seems like a crazy idea, I mean, see for yourself. Star Wars Conquest managed to recreate the entire galaxy, they added tons of new scenery to match each planet, and of course, we have the laser rifles, the lightsabers, and even some force powers. So in terms of adaptations, this is about as faithful to Star Wars as it can get for a Warband mod, and somehow, it still works great. I really don't have much to say about that one, so if you love Star Wars, this mod will be a great experience. And number 5, this is Touhou Gensokyo Warfare. This mod is based on the Touhou project, an extensive series of video games dating back to the 90s, which centers on the world of Gensokyo, an isolated realm within Japan where magic and fantasy exists. Once again, not a franchise I'm familiar with, but the mod is pretty cool in several ways. First off, as you're noticing, the mod borrowed the anime aesthetic of the games, and then so in a way that works surprisingly well. So it's definitely unique, but there's also a central storyline which, as you follow, you get to experience and learn more about the world of Gensokyo yourself. So even if you're not a fan, the mod makes the world much easier to understand and does so with an interesting story that often feels like a visual novel. It's certainly a different mod from other Warband mods, but that's what makes it great, and as far as I know, an update might be coming soon too. At number 4, Revenge of the Berserk. This mod is based on the popular Berserk manga, and to my knowledge, features the exact same story. In the mod, you play as the main character, Guts, a massive mercenary with an even bigger sword, and you go through the story while fighting your way through waves of enemies in what I can only say is Warband at its most badass. Overall, it's a really solid mod, it ranked really high in my story mods video, as well as in other rankings, and it's still in active development, so great mod overall, even if you never read the manga, which I did not. Number 3, we have The Last Days of the Third Age. As far as Lord of the Rings mods go, look no further. This might actually be one of the greatest mods ever made, from the massive world of Middle-earth to all of its scenery, which is absolutely beautiful, as well as all of the factions and the items, and even the story itself, which you can play through from both sides of the conflict, as different races, from elves and dwarves to orcs. It's got it all. The only reasons the mod doesn't rank higher is because, for one, I don't actually like Lord of the Rings. I've seen the movies, I know what it's about, I just always thought it was tremendously boring. Hot take, I know. But also, for all its amazing features, one of the weirdest is the mod's insistence on having each faction have its own currency in the form of influence that can only be earned through completing quests. By design, this is meant to make sure you only ever stick to one faction for the whole playthrough, but unless you cheat, that's just incredibly limiting, hence I was not a fan of that. But besides that, I mean, The Last Days of the Third Age is inevitably going to be ranking high on any list you put it in, it is just a really solid mod. At number 2, we have Warsword Conquest. Warsword Conquest is based on Warhammer Fantasy, which is already one of the most absurd fantasy settings that ever existed, but on that, Warsword Conquest, over years of constant development, has proven more than capable of adapting the setting. Warsword Conquest has a massive world filled with the most beautiful scenery, tons of variety in non-human species, a wide range of spells, guns, and many huge dungeons to explore for loot. This all makes Warsword Conquest one of the craziest fantasy mods to ever play, and while it's based on Warhammer Fantasy, it's not necessary to know the lore at all to just have some brainless fun, going to war with the craziest of armies to fight the craziest of monsters. Warsword Conquest is just overpowered fun all around, and it's awesome. And finally, at number 1, I always put these two mods together because they have pretty much the same level of quality but just achieve different things. This is A Clash of Kings and The World of Ice and Fire. These two mods are based on the same works of George R.R. Martin from the Song of Ice and Fire series, or Game of Thrones if you watch the TV show. As such, both mods take us to the worlds of Westeros and Essos, and all of the kingdoms and characters that are part of it. The reason I put them together is because in terms of quality, they really are just equally good. They both recreated the world faithfully, they both have amazing scenery, they both have all of the items, so it really comes down to how you want to play the game. In A Clash of Kings, I would say this mod tends to lean more towards native gameplay, but also puts a lot of emphasis on exploring as a solo adventurer. For example, there are tons of unique places that you can explore in the world where you can find secret caches of loot, which also give you extra XP, but all of these places are part of the Game of Thrones lore. For example, you can explore the Tower of Joy, which holds a fairly critical piece of the story in the world. You can also explore the ruins of Castamere, which is integral to the story of the Lannister family. You can also explore abandoned castles at the Wall, which are all creepier than the next. In that way, I find A Clash of Kings to be a really interesting, immersive, one-time experience, but I've never gotten through it all, so every once in a while, I always find myself playing it again. A World of Ice and Fire, on the other hand, is based off Brit and Walda, much like Age of Arthur, and as such, it's a very hardcore mod with lots of different hardcore features, but as such, this also puts more emphasis on building your warband and going to war. So as I've said, it really comes down to what kind of playstyle you want to have. But both mods feature the same unique characters, they both have unique quests of their own, so just because you play one doesn't mean you shouldn't play the other. They're both great as far as I'm concerned. And in terms of adaptations, I do happen to be a massive fan of the Song of Ice and Fire books. As such, I feel both mods did a terrific job of adapting the world it's based on, and because of that, they're number one of my list. And that's about it for today. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you enjoyed the video and made it this far, please subscribe to support the channel. As of making this video, I'm getting close to 10,000 subscribers, so we gotta keep going. Also, check out the rest of my channel. I've covered Warband mods extensively, and be on the lookout for the biggest mod video yet. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.